Good evening and welcome to yet another episode of Money Control Masterclass Ideas for a New India. The topic we're discussing this evening is very pertinent. It's something that we have been reporting on for the last few months. Now, the same time last year, we were keeping a count of how many startups became unicorns. But things have changed so quickly that we are now keeping track of how many people have been laid off from some of these highly and well funded startups and unicorns. In fact, at last count, over 12,000 employees have been laid off across Indian startups, and the pain has been particularly acute in the edtech space. So, why is this happening? What's the way forward? And how can youngsters really navigate this downturn? To discuss all this and more, we have a very special panel on Money Control Masterclass. Shekhar Garesa, the CEO of Monster India, TN Hari, the former CHRO of Big Basket, who currently runs Artha School of Entrepreneurship, and Ayush Jaiswal, the co founder and CEO of Pesto Tech. Thank you all very much. We're also going to have Mayank Kumar of Upgrad, as well as Rituparna Chakrabarti of Team Leads joining us shortly. They're currently caught up in the rains in Mumbai, but as soon as they're able to join us, we'll add them on the show. But thank you all very much for joining us. And as I said, unfortunately, the unicorn tracker has turned into a layoff tracker in 2022 for people covering the startup ecosystem closely. So before I go to Shekhar, I just want to get Hari and Ayush's views on this. You guys would have seen, previous cycles of this. 2015, for example, was rather painful. How does the current phase measure up to that in terms of the job losses that we are seeing? Because the number of unicorns, sonicorns, startups has disproportionately increased from 2015.
You want to go
Uh,
first, Ayush?
yeah, no, I was barely starting my career at that point in 2015. So I'll let you go first here, since you would have more context for sure.
We'll defer to your wisdom,
Yeah.
Hari.
So yeah, I think 2016 was probably the India's version of the .com. I think where several startups that did not build businesses in a very sustainable way, where they had lost track of profitability completely and had focused only on growth. I think all of them went down. And I think, even in 2022, what we are seeing is that you mentioned, several unicorns are also laying off people. What has happened is that many of these current unicorns are also, using a lot of capital, to acquire or create a market. So I think burning too much of capital to create a market is not particularly sustainable and is very, very prone to, something drastic happening when the money tap is turned off. And I think that's what has clearly happened. And what happens is that when a large funding round comes through, and these unicorns then go on a hiring spree, hire large numbers of people. There's a compromise on quality. There's a compromise on culture fit. There's a compromise on compensation bands. Everything is broken to hire people in large numbers to deliver outcomes promised to investors. But deeply, if you look at it, some of these are unsustainable in the long run. And when I say unsustainable, means that a business should be able to weather some downturn at least, and it should not be laying off people at the shortest trigger. And that's what we are seeing. So I am really, it happened not just for the white collar employees, it happened for the Ola, Uber drivers also. In the growth phase, they promised them large incentives. People went and bought cars on loans and began driving. And then suddenly the rates went down, incentives went down, and these guys were unable to repay their loans. So this also is a form of layoff in the blue collar category, which we ignore sometimes. So my sense, in summary, is that 2016 was the first of India's version of the .com bust. I think many of these firms went down, PepperTap, and so many of them. I think, I worked for Big Basket. I can say with some confidence that Big Basket was a sustainable and honest enterprise that survived this downturn, sailed through this downturn very easily. And 2022, we are seeing something similar. Money tap turned off. Those that were dependent on capital to create unsustainable markets have suffered the most.
Right, Mayank of Upgrad is here. Welcome to the show, Mayank. You've
Gotcha.
braved the Mumbai rains to come on masterclass, so thank you for that. But
No, thank
Ayush,
you.
do you want to take a stab at that? So Hari spoke
Absolutely,
about
yeah.
how essentially these cash burning models are
Yeah,
now finding it very difficult to weather the
yeah,
downturn. And at the first sign of trouble, the first thing that they do is undertake layoffs. And one has to ask,
absolutely.
how sustainable were these business models in the first place then? Ayush?
Yeah. No, 100%. I think like it's actually the nature of the market, I would say, right? Like if you blitz scale a company and really grow at that pace, then the question is that what is the cost of that growth, right? And I think businesses which basically have like keep a close track on their fundamentals, culture, unit economics, and so on and so forth, would of course like end up building great businesses from a longer term perspective. But businesses again, which depend on which does not have like a strong unit economics to sustain themselves, we will almost always see layoffs and things of that nature. Correction, which is also very healthy, right, for the ecosystem. Correction is always good. It keeps the builders in the game, and people learn from it. So I think we're just going through another cycle. There are a lot of great companies which will come out of it. People who have built companies with like great fundamentals, unit economics, so on and so forth. And yeah, I guess like for next few years we'll see the winter, but we will go through the cycle again, right? So of course, like I didn't realize the 2015 cycle as closely because I was like just about to start my journey, my professional journey. But I think this one, for this one specifically, in context with what's happening now, I think companies with good fundamentals are actually happier because this correction is actually would help them at some point as they build back up. So great time to be builders next few years. But yeah, I see this as like a cycle of the market, and last couple of years of course were crazy. So we will see the impact of that in next few months for sure.
Right. Maya, we were talking about how over 12,000 employees have been laid off across Indian startups this year. And, this is just the formal count that we have. I mean, informally, unofficially, I'm sure it must be a higher number because many of the smaller startups don't get counted. And if I look at the companies listed there, the pain particularly seems to be acute in the edtech space. I mean, all of your peers, An Academy, Byju's, Vedantu, Eruditus, all of them have undertaken layoffs. So, how is Upgrad coping amidst this, pain in edtech? And will you also look at rationalizing, or are you comfortably placed for now?
I don't know if there's a FOMO, Chandra, but like if everybody's doing it, then maybe everybody should be doing it. But keeping that FOMO aside, I guess Hari raised a very important point that look, this what happened in the last 2 years, 3 years is that while COVID had an impact overall in the business demand, etc., but a lot of offline ecosystem shutting down, the demand, at least in the tech space, went to online. So online did take up a lot of demand, and therefore today. When the offline is sort of opening up, a bit of demand from the online ecosystem is moving back to offline. And therefore, there's one shift of demand happening, at least between the online and offline ecosystem. The second critical thing that what we had noticed, at least in that ecosystem at last 2 years, was that coming of the demand was supported by a lot of cheap capital available, and capital was available for anyone to raise at that point of time. So as Hari said rightly, that a lot of folks did put across a business model that was not sustainable. The cost of acquisition of one individual learner used to be 3 times what the first time payout was going to be. I'm not even talking about gross margin. Even the first time ARPU, what the person would end up paying, you were spending about 3 to 4 times of that amount just to acquire the customer. And that growth was artificial growth because you were buying growth to a very large extent. Now, with offline opening up, capital the availability sort of coming down, what we are seeing now is coming back to more saner economics and sane ecosystem, and that is impacting the overall sort of play of the edtech folks, where people are struggling to sort of go through the journey. And today you will see a lot more decisions which are meant to be taken in a keeping in mind sustainable unit economics, the right acquisition model, overall the right sort of LTV for the customer. People want to see profitability today, not a hope for profit tomorrow. Because of that, you are seeing a lot of place with all due respect to all the large sort of edtech providers out there, they have phenomenal business. But in building that business out, there's always that investor pressure, and the founder also gets through the journey that, look, now we need to grow very rapidly. And at some time, you have to take a step back and say, look, this growth was not sustainable. And if capital is moving out, we will see more and more scale and sane growth coming in. Just in the last 24, 48 hours, Chandra, I've heard 3 edtech companies shutting down. So if you are saying that this is I do believe this is just a start of the cycle. You will see a lot many more of these steps being taken, at least in the ecosystem. But post that, market is there. Yes, absolutely, market is there. We'll see a lot many
Yeah.
more sustainable companies coming up post this sort of phase that the tech ecosystem is going through.
That's quite brutal. 3 edtech companies shutting down in the last 48 hours alone. One has to wonder about, the kind of bubble in the edtech space in the last year. So much of capital deployed because of the pandemic effect. But Ritu and Shekhar, I want to bring you in here. You have a ringside view to how employment is panning out, shaping out across sectors, not just startups. Ritu, how do you view these layoffs that you're seeing across the board happening at various startups and unicorns in India? Is it broad based, or is it just the startup phase space that's kind of facing the brunt of it?
First and foremost, apologies for being late. As you can see, I'm in the middle of the airport. So, again, if any disturbances, please bear with me. First and foremost, any kind of layoff is heartbreaking. So, no two ways about it. However, I guess I personally have been thinking about it a lot for the last maybe a month or so, that this is just the kind of wake up call that, especially around the employment market, with relation to startup hiring, that we probably required. I'm somebody who is extremely thankful, and I've always kind of backed up startups for the kind of innovation they're doing, the kind of employment that they've been generating. However, there has been a certain amount of irrationality, mindlessness in terms of the way hirings have been happening, the way choices, and honestly, more than the founders of these startup companies, I'd like to pose a question to the individuals, the candidates, today's youth, in terms of how they're going about making these career choices. Because I'm actually appalled and surprised by some of the parameters that are being used to make choices. It's random. We are going for the frills, getting carried away by the noise rather than asking questions on fundamentals. What's the balance between product innovation versus, let's say, the desperation towards market expansion? What is the when do you think that the cash burn is likely to end? The fundamental questions that one should ask before taking a plunge in terms of making a career choice. I think the reasons for joining the startup ecosystem has gone all awry. I've been a big believer that yes, you should work with startup because there's a lot to learn. But somewhere learning is no more the reason why people have been chasing or have been getting deluded by the offers. I'm not saying that every startup is going in the same direction. There are still startups who are sound, whose fundamentals are sound. So I hesitate to make it a broad brush that it's happening with every startups. It's happening across every tech company. It's happening in every other kind of technology companies. That's not the case. But yes, I actually would like to move the needle towards the right kind of questions that people need to ask. However, it's not all doom and gloom, to be honest. These kids, these youth are extremely skilled, and the situation on ground is such that the rebadging is not taking honestly that long a time, because they do bring in some valuable skill set. Yes, it's heartbreaking, even if it's a 1 week gap, even if it's a 1 month gap. However, there are options. If you give me a chance, maybe later I can talk about those options.
Right. Shekhar, Ritu made an interesting point there. I'll come to the first part of it later, but she said the rebadging is not taking that much time because, there are these employees do have valuable skills. If you can give us your own perspective, And also the stigma around being laid off. I mean, I saw Hitesh of Naukri make an important point that if an employee is laid off, then companies should come out and say that they have been laid off because of business reasons and not because of something else, because it could impact their employment prospects going forward. So, do you think employers, look at this as a criteria when they look for candidates, or has the mindset changed? If you can give us that perspective as well.
Sure. I think first and foremost, I think what startups do get right when they get right is the quality of hiring. I think we do have to admit that the bar for getting into a startup is reasonably high, and therefore, whoever has made it in the first place has solid skills and competency. So, from that perspective, what we are noticing is that while we talk about this 11,000, 12,000, whatever is the latest count in terms of people that have been laid off, and several of us, including Monster as well, we've been running dedicated programs to see how we can outplace them. The demand for this talent has been very high. I really don't think there's an issue with this talent pool finding jobs quickly. I do not think there is any stigma around it. I think thankfully whatever happens to startups gets amplified in the media quite a lot. So people are aware if a particular person is coming in from a particular startup, we know the context of why they are coming in. So I don't think there's any stigma attached to it. I don't think people are equating the competency of the candidate to being laid off. At least I think that part of it has been taken care of because of widespread news in the media. And therefore, these people are easily getting the jobs. I think the key concern here would be the salary levels. We all know how things have been over the last couple of years. So the salary levels are really high. Some of this talent pool will need to make rational choices in terms of, okay, maybe, I won't get the same kind of a hike I'm thinking about, or maybe I'll join at the same level. Maybe I'm operating at the higher end of the spectrum. So maybe I'll have to be a little more practical about compensation. So compensation correction might happen, but I really don't think there's an issue in terms of, at least the talent that's getting laid off from startups being absorbed elsewhere. And in a way, it's good. I think the high salary levels and attrition and people jumping around with multiple offers, not very long ago, 2-3 months back, this is what we were all talking about. So in a way, it's not all that bad. I like what Ayush also said, that it's good and healthy for the correction to happen, and especially in the top tech talent. But that said, across the board, if you look at the volume of jobs, we publish our monthly index, Monster Employment Index, and we reported only a 4% drop between April and May, which is marginal. But on a year-on-year basis, we still went up. So there are sectors which are looking at hiring in big numbers still. And even within the tech sector, while some of these startups are not hiring as much, but there are enough people who are still looking for quality tech talent. Unless things go really south from here, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, I think at the current levels, at best we're looking at some salary corrections.
Just a follow-up question, Shekhar. You said that there are many sectors that are still hiring. For the benefit of our viewers, job seekers watching this show, can you tell us about which sectors are hiring, geography, skills, and what roles?
Yeah. So telecom has seen a big jump in terms of hiring. For a while, the sector has been a little subdued. I think now there's action picking up with the 5G auction guidelines and timelines, etc. We've seen even BFI, so the traditional companies in BFSI, through the pandemic, they did not hire much. So we saw almost a 40% uptick in terms of jobs from there. Hospitality and tourism, again, something that I'm personally watching out, because they've been hit very badly, and we all know how much people are traveling, staying, staycations, work from anywhere. That's seeing a real leg up in terms of the demand there. Supply chain professionals, I think over the last couple of years, we know that supply chains have been disrupted. Now it's cross-border business has picked up, so we're seeing a lot of jobs there. So and the digital transformation story is still on. While companies might say, I'm not going to hire as many, startups might say that, but almost every single organization is in the middle of, or is going to start, or is going to continue their process of digital transformation. Therefore, the demand for tech talent, it might just be different companies hiring them, but the demand is very, very robust.
Yeah.
Right. Hari, Ritu made an important point
Sorry,
about how... Yeah.
Sorry, you asked a question around location, and an interesting perspective.
Yeah.
We are actually struggling to find out location of these jobs ourselves, because there was a time earlier people would say, I need this person. It's possible that the company posting the job is in Bangalore, but it's just, we're also... it's a new challenge for us, as a business to even comment about location these days.
Ayush is
But yeah, a
happy
lot
with
of
that
jobs,
because
especially the tech
this
ones, are
business is
open.
all about these remote postings.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I think
But one
I'm
thing
so
I do
happy
have to
because,
say that
sorry, go ahead, Shekhar.
sorry, just finishing the sentence. For the first time after so many months or quarters, Bangalore is not in the top three. I mean, it's kind of maybe an indicator
Wow.
that the startup team's going down. But
No,
my
I think
location,
it's not in the
I kind
top
of
three because
I think it's
Bangalore
difficult to
people
compete.
are overpaid, at least in startups. So I think people want to hire from other cities. Last year there were stories going around about how engineers in Bangalore are paid more
Yeah.
than one sitting in San Francisco.
The
So
Valley
perhaps
Yeah.
engineers.
why it's not in the top three, and because of all these salary corrections that are happening. But Hari, Ritu made an important point about the motivation to join a startup. You learn a lot, but the incentives have gone awry in the last year with all kinds of packages being thrown in, incentives being thrown in, be it flashy cars, expensive trips. Uh, this, how has this kind of impacted or skewed hiring, the kind of people who are coming into the ecosystem?
Right. Frankly, I think there is a lot of learning in startups. And I mean that, what you learn in a startup in 1 year probably will take 4 years in a more mature company to learn. But people don't necessarily join a startup because of the learning experience, but because of all the good things that are thrown in. So I think irrational exuberance often hits the stock markets and the startup ecosystem. These two sectors are prone to irrational exuberance and irrational fears. So the cycle of hiring and the cycle of firing, is alternates. So I think Shekhar also mentioned that multiple offers, candidates receiving. So I think there are two types of companies. One is the sustainable and honest enterprises. I call them the SHEs, which is sustainable and honest enterprises, and individuals also who try and build sustainable and honest careers. So I think both individuals and companies sometimes go awry when it comes to doing things. So individuals also have made full use of the buoyancy in this sector, have negotiated multiple offers, have taken salaries which would never otherwise be paid to them, and now are having to take very serious pay cuts. So I think building a business sustainably and honestly is very important, and looking at a career equally sustainably and honestly is important as well for individuals. So that's what I would say.
Right. Ritu, you said that you have some options in mind for, employees who unfortunately may have been laid off. If you can, give us a sense of what they can look to do, what alternatives can they pursue, or what should they kind of really up their game in. These kind of tips will really help them.
So, before I respond to that, I think I'll just do a follow-on point to what Hari mentioned, which is, it's an anecdote which happened just today morning, where one of the well-known MBA college, I'm doing a session for the kids there, and one of their student counselors actually reached out to me and said, "Listen, there is one message if you could help them get across." I said, "What is it?" So he mentioned that these kids, they feel that they don't really have to work hard anymore because or not even pursue excellence in their academics, because no matter what, once they come out, they will get a very handsome package, and the package is pretty much it. And they also don't seem to exhibit the urge to work hard towards a much bigger ambition than just that first salary, that attractive salary that they're going to get. So I think that's something which has been bothering me quite a bit, and somewhere I feel teeny weeny, I think the responsibility goes to what's been happening in the startup ecosystem, that this message seemed to have gone down to the millennials and Gen Zs. I think what are the options that are available? I think first and foremost, there are enough and more employers today who become, thanks to the pandemic, more flexible in terms of the kind of resources they're looking at. People are no more looking at the traditional fit, for the jobs that they are looking at or they have. There are a lot of people who are opening to taking people, of course, through gig options. Just come to me for spend some time, 2 hours a day, or probably twice a week. So those options are always available. One should obviously be very open to some of these concepts. I'm a big believer in apprenticeship. And I mean, I spend my whole day these days talking about an apprenticeship is not anymore just for freshers or people just coming out of colleges or dropouts. Apprenticeship is for all of us. I think if somebody can pick up an apprenticeship option with any organization, one should just absolutely lap it up and go for it. Most of the people or the volumes where the layoffs have happened have been happening at the entry to mid level. You're still very young, and hence there's a lot of headroom to be able to cover up, grow, and achieve your dreams. So now is the time for you to make sure that you utilize your time gainfully. Many sectors, I think Shekhar has already touched upon, that there are many sectors who are actively hiring. To be honest, there are at any point of time, we have a problem where we are not finding sufficient talent for the open positions and the vacancies that we have. And that's why I had that confidence right at the beginning that, even if there is a lag of a week or 15 days a month, rebadging is very much imminently possible, until unless there is some other dysfunctionality. So many sectors are opening. Just keep an open mind. And like everybody's been saying, that drop your standards when it comes to compensations. Be flexible on the kind of contracts that you're signing. Even if somebody's giving you a contract with lesser notice pay, just go for it. I think just ignore the frills and focus on the learning. So that's pretty much it.
It's a very good takeaway. Ignore the frills and focus on the learning. And you know what you said about youngsters who are not willing to kind of put in the effort. That's something that I hear across the board. I don't want to get into a controversy. I don't know if this is a Gen Z thing or a millennial thing, but I perennially hear about this from everyone, including editors, about how they find it very hard to make people stay interested in a job, have that hunger for a sustained period of time. I don't know if it's because of the number of options that are available today, or the fact that perhaps they are more comfortably off than when we started our careers. But this is a complaint that I hear across the board, and I'd actually like to hear from Mayank and Ayush if this is something that they face with some of their younger employees. I mean, is it hard to kind of tell them that you can't be so entitled, you have to put in that effort, put in that grind in order to get those rewards? Mike, maybe you can go first, and
No, I think
Ayush can jump in.
there's a bit of that definitely in the ecosystem. When you get rewards easily, you do end up being a little complacent in terms of the hard work that you put in. And the last 2 years of stock markets and the last 2 year of Bitcoin pricing hasn't helped it either. So those all have led it to folks realizing that, look, I can make money easily. I mean, I may be sitting with 5 lakh of bank account or 1 lakh of bank account, and I can just get to 2 lakhs in 2 months very quickly. Having said that, on all sort of serious note, I do believe that so this is what I do, Chandra. Every time I start any induction process at Upgrade, I ask them one question: that look, what's the ratio of your number of years of experience divided by the number of jobs that you are in, or this is your second job or third job? The answer typically ranges from anywhere between 1.52 to 4.5. I don't get 6 or 7:1 or 8:1. Nobody has been in 24 years in third job. And then I ask them a follow-up question: what's your parents' number? And the answer typically is 20:1, 30:1, 40:1. And that's the ecosystem shift that we are seeing. Today, people are shifting job very frequently because jobs are available. Today, given that the previous generation has made the current generation slightly more safer in terms of the income that they are willing to take 5 months of sabbatical. I never thought that 5 months of sabbatical is possible, at least when I was going through my career, but it is an option on the table. Because it's an option on the table, people are quite comfortable that, look, I have the backing. My family situation is not that I need to earn for my family's sort of sake. I can take a break. My parents are sorted. My parents are settled. But I'm seeing that shifting also. Just like I can tell you, in the last 2 months, at least, what I'm seeing at Upgrade is that everybody is far more charged up because of all the news of layoffs happening. I do see a shift happening in the mindset because people used to earlier think that, look, if anything happens here, I have something to fall back on. Today, that option is not there for many folks, and therefore people are I'm seeing a little bit of shift happening. People do end up reaching on the office at 9:30 a.m. 10:30 a.m. office is full. I don't have to tell everybody that look, 11 o'clock, if you're not coming in, I need to take some action. But that shift is happening. Given the optionality out there, of the optionality reducing, I do see that more and more what the norm is would come back into action.
Yeah, I don't know what the scene in Bangalore is. Interestingly, I met Ayush a couple of weeks ago, and we were with one other
Yeah.
founder. He said, I prefer to stay in Bombay, hire people in Bombay because they at least come early and leave late. Bangalore, people come late and leave early.
Yeah.
So, he actually cited that as a reason why he's not here. But Ayush, what trends are you picking up, in the youngsters you work with or people you're placing?
100%. No, I saw this question coming my way, being closest to Gen Z. But I'm of the same opinion. I think it's crazy. And I think, like, naturally, if we think about it logically, none of these people have actually seen, the 2015 bust or the 2008 crisis. So they don't really understand or appreciate other things as much, right? Like loyalty or thinking about committing to a company from a longer duration perspective and things of that nature, right? So I think this is a learning for them, right? And I would say at Pesto we have always been betting on remote as a category, and from the early days I've seen this behavior that a lot of developers, like the first 10 developers, let's say, made 5 times more than what they made before, right? Like we have some people making 80 lakhs plus top 3, and they were making 3-4 lakhs earlier, right? So it's great returns for them, and we are like very proud, excited that okay, we could pull that off. But I think just looking at the change in behavior and mindset of these folks, I feel that even though people would get short-term benefits and make more money, but I think they really miss out on learnings and things of that nature. And with this correction coming in, I think that shift is also happening in a way, right? Like people are appreciating things more. The expectations we have seen have gone down significantly, which Shekhar pointed out earlier, and people are now looking at a company they could really commit to, look at work culture, the kind of work they're doing, so on and so forth. And of course, like in last 1 year, we all know it was a little crazier, right? But I think this is more like a learning for everybody in the Gen Z category, right?
Yeah, Ayush, in the kind of the roles that you're seeing, right? Because you work with a lot of international companies. If you can give us a sense of the kind of roles that are still in demand, the kind of skills that people are still looking for in potential employees that people can capitalize on. If you can give us some suggestions there.
Gotcha. So I think like my area of expertise is limited to technology. And I think in tech, software developers are almost always going to be in demand. And in fact, I feel that this correction, which has happened over the next couple of years, this is going to, in fact, increase the amount of opportunities. Of course, like not the compensations as much, but I think in terms of the number of roles and the companies, I think a lot more companies are now, I read some stat that more than 600 large companies are looking to open up some sort of R&D centers or tech shops in India. And I can only see that increasing, especially with remote becoming a norm and people being more comfortable with working people who are not in office, is only going to increase. So I think like for software developers, looking at things like data science or full stack web dev and things of that nature, there is, we should expect growth. And, India basically has supply, and this has always been a supply constraint thing. Like the quality of supply has been the constraint. So that should always, sort of, this is a big opportunity, let's say, next few years, right? For people who are really focusing on fundamentals and doing the hard work, right? Which you said people these days are not as excited about.
Right. Shekhar, taking that question forward in terms of the skills in demand, in fact, we noticed that product and engineering roles, some level of salary inflation is still there. It hasn't, corrected as much because most of the layoffs, if you notice, it's happened in support functions and, marketing functions and content functions and so on. So if you can give us a sense of where you're seeing the demand now, the kind of skills that people want in the current market.
Yeah, so I think Aish also mentioned briefly full stack developers, data scientists. I think these roles increasingly you will know that these roles will be paid the top dollar for. But across the board in tech, right, as people start scaling up, people who work on infrastructure side of things, again, we'll see, I find it tough to believe that anything can make the demand for tech professionals go down. I think it's on an irreversible path. I'm pretty convinced about it, right? What might happen because of this, and I'm a little more sympathetic towards youngsters, maybe because I know we've not walked the choices that they have walked. So maybe sometimes, we can say things about
Yes.
the way they make decisions. So I'm a little more sympathetic. I know it's sometimes it's frustrating, sometimes when you see some of these behaviors. But what might end up happening now is the difference between a great developer and a good or an average developer. I think that difference is going to go up, because what the past couple of years has told us is that if a tech talent is really great, it makes sense for the organizations to pay for it. And I use it all the time, even when I look at my own hiring philosophy, right? You hire a great marketeer. The difference between a good and a bad marketeer is probably 10% cost of what they spend to get the outcomes. A great and a good salesperson is probably, again, maybe take 10% more time to get to the same number. But the difference between a great tech talent and a good tech talent is actually quite a lot. And it's scalable, whatever the tech resources do. So I am a firm believer that the tech talent demand is never going to come down. And from that perspective, whatever the time may be, people have to focus on, calibrating themselves, trying to find a way to validate that they're good. And if they're good, what the pandemic has also shown us now is they can be a global talent. Sitting in India, they can absolutely earn in dollars. And that arbitrage, while some people have had it, I think now we're seeing a lot. I mean, for example, Monster is a global organization, so we can put like few thousands of sales guys in Monster US and Europe to work, because what we're trying to do is, okay, here is the quality of talent available in India, the top 1%, 2%, whatever you may call. And it's not just the large organizations out there, but everyone can hire these people. And in fact, it's happening in Bangalore as well. Interestingly, Chandra, you mentioned I met someone over the last weekend, and that person runs a company in Bangalore, and where his tech talent is sitting? China and Palestine. The company is in Bangalore, but their talent sits in China and Palestine because they think Bangalore is very expensive now. So we're seeing all kinds of stuff happening. But I'm a firm believer that tech talent is going to have a great time, and just
Remote
people
is
have
here.
to commit to being good in what they do. I think there's a bit of a frivolousness, because whether you are good, average, below average, everybody was getting compensated the same way. Now I think there will be a bit more, curation in terms of who gets the big bucks, who don't. And I think, over a period of time, it will be sufficient motivation for people to kind of upskill themselves, make themselves, because they see the difference between being just average or being great. So I guess, for
Absolutely.
Brad and Pesto, I think it's going to be great days.
Yeah.
Right.
100%.
In fact, you guys are talking about collaborating, so good for both of you. Ritu, are you seeing, some of these jobs move back to safe spaces like IT services, multinational companies, captives of large global organizations? Because a lot of people felt IT companies were losing out on tech talent because of startups and unicorns. So, are you seeing that shift where people want to be in safe sectors that will not, bust up in 6 months or 12 months, that are cash flow positive and highly profitable?
I think every other sector will be a beneficiary of this wake up that has happened and the jolt that has been faced by many talents. So, and interestingly, every organization over the last 2 years have had massive enterprise changes, structural. There has been a massive push towards digitalization, adoption of technology across the, all workflows. So yes, there is definitely some amount of, shift that is happening. Captives, I think I've been seeing this crawlers. Yes, captives definitely is a big market. I think I agree with everyone else on the panel that, there is a lot of discussion going on captives coming to India and setting up, and across all industries. I mean, there are automobile captives being set up. There are pharmaceutical captives being set up. It's not just technology, but yes, there is a lot of focus on technology even for them. So R&D technology captives are going to be hiring in a big way, and so would the other traditional sectors who so far have been lamenting that when they need engineers, they don't find the good engineers because they somehow get diverted. Everybody, like, I remember a friend of mine long ago, that's like decades ago, like was a mechanical engineer, and which company did you join? Well, one of these large IT services companies. So it didn't matter, honestly. While typically, there are enough and more takers in traditional sectors for a mechanical engineer. So hopefully there will be a little bit of an equitable distribution of talent and good talent across these industries, and it would come up in the form of new opportunities as well for some of these youths.
Yeah,
So,
it
yeah.
almost seems like payback for some of these IT companies, because I remember large conglomerates used to complain a lot that
Yeah.
these people are
Correct.
taking away our civil engineers and mechanical engineers and making them
Yeah.
do C++ and Java. But
Just a side
Hari,
note, Chandan, this was a very sorry, just to
yeah,
add one
yes,
more
Mike.
thing. The last month I visited, I mean, 2 months back, I visited the US, and everybody who works in the Google, the Metas, and the Amazons of the world were very happy because they're saying all my friends left in hope for the big sort of tech firms, and all the stocks have fallen, but we are holding on to our stock prices. So there is that sort of revenge ecosystem playing out that okay, the old school is the right school.
Yeah.
The big tech is still solid right there. But Hari, on a more serious note, what would your advice be to someone who has perhaps joined a startup with a lot of anticipation? We have spoken to some of these employees. 6 months ago, this startup has raised, say, $400 million, $500 million. They saw the startup raising big money. They got a very good pay package. They joined the startup. 6 months later, they've been laid off for no fault of their own. And there have been instances where their dad and had warned them that don't join this startup. Are you sure this is a good place? Why don't you take up a job in an IT company? But they still went ahead and took the plunge, and now they're kind of paying the price. What would your advice be?
Yeah, I'll just go back, Chandra, I'll answer this question, but we talked to the big tech companies like Google, Facebook, being able to retain people. I'm quite happy, as Mayank mentioned. But I also think, that Google and Facebook were also, small at some point of time. They were also small tech. They were also probably laying off people. And out of that ashes, these big companies emerged. I'm
Yeah.
sure out of these ashes also, you will have a large company like a Flipkart. You might end up having some who will go on to become Googles and Facebooks. So I think this entire process of creative destruction is part of
Yeah.
evolution itself. So coming back to this your question about what my advice, I really wouldn't want to advise. I'm not really concerned about the kind of issues they're facing. Frankly, I think Shekhar mentioned these are very, very employable people. I think even if they are laid off very quickly, they can find alternate jobs if they are willing to take a fair cut in terms of their compensation. And these are just 12,000 people. And I think, when you are offered a pay packet that's 50, 60% or 100%, 200% more than your current pay packet, irrespective of how much you love your job, there's a temptation to always shift. So I think what youngsters are doing, to me, I really think that, the same Maslow's law applies where, money still, when it is more important than learning. So I think it's inevitable that they will take up these jobs, and they may ignore their father's advice. I don't know why fathers should be advising adults who are 25-year-olds. So I think these 25-year-olds, 30-year-olds should be taking their own decisions. And I'm sure they have weighed all these decisions. They know that some companies that are burning a lot of capital will end up sometimes laying off. They know the risk. Just as founders have taken the risk of starting a venture, employees who join these high growth startups also know that they are taking a risk, and they are capable of dealing with these kind of layoffs. I think this is not really tragedy. 12,000 people being laid off is not tragedy. Tragedy happened at the start of the pandemic when millions of people who owned restaurants and were in the hospitality business, taxi drivers, they lost their businesses. Domestic help lost their, and they had no alternative employment opportunities. To me, that is tragedy. This is not tragedy. These are very smart people, very well educated, and they are a part of a great long-term trend. I think Shekhar mentioned, tech will never come down. I think there are three long-term trends. One is we are certainly going to run out of fossil fuels. The world will get warmer, and technology will be embedded in every business. So 12,000 people will very easily get jobs. I'm not at all worried. and I have no advice to offer them. In fact, you also asked the question some time back as to, these are people changing jobs. What should companies tell them? I think companies shouldn't be telling them anything. Companies, if they hire them, they should just focus on creating a great workplace for them, make it an enjoyable place where they can continuously learn, stress-free culture. And I think that will probably keep them a little longer and not get them to job hop as frequently. I don't think you should be advising them that don't take up these jobs, don't job hop in 1.5 years. Average tenure of 2 years is very bad. I don't think adults should need any kind of advice. I don't think we as
Yeah.
much older people should even proffer to advise. They're smart people. They will take their decisions. And I'm really not worried at all, because these are 12,000 very smart, very well educated people who will find their way.
That's really, really heartening to hear, Hari. And, also your points on creating the right environment, that perhaps is the best recipe to retain talent, because there have been instances of well-funded startups that pay exorbitant salaries that don't seem to hold employees, even for 3 months and 6 months because of the work culture and the toxicity. So, fair point, well made. Mayank and Shekhar, a couple of questions that we're getting from our viewers. I'm just going to ask you to take this one. So, okay, so this guy, so Sachin says that, many startup leaders and business leaders preach on LinkedIn about certification courses, but when it comes to selection, they stay away. So why not give a chance if you can see promise in the candidate? And not everyone is born with skills. Would you like to weigh in on this? Are people still hung up about universities and degrees, or are people hiring based on certifications?
So just
But this
few
LinkedIn
points.
Gyan is a valid point. On LinkedIn, they'll say, degrees are passe and colleges are passe. But when it comes to resume, you have to see, those colleges and degrees.
As people say, Chanda, that the moment there's a downturn in the market, education sort of picks up. So there's always that sort of
Yeah.
journey that happens. But I do see today this entire concept of lifelong learning and people having the right skills becoming more and more mainstream. I I mean, while credentials are important at the early stage of your first job, second job, etc., but over a period of time. Personally, when I am hiring, I do look for folks because I'm in the online education space. So anyone who trusts online education definitely sort of stands out. But two, very importantly, it shows me that the person has taken out time and effort from their 50 hour, 80 hours, 100 hours week, spending additional 30
Yeah.
hours, 40 hours over a period of
Yeah.
time. It just shows a commitment. It's a sign that you have put in the effort, and
Yeah.
that effort demonstrate that the person is willing to go beyond the regular means to go and take up the stretch sort of role, etc. So those are the signals that you get. Whether you get fully skilled or not, that's a secondary point. But the first attitude-wise, it puts in that look, the person is willing to spend on himself or herself. The person is willing to spend that time outside the regular sort of work hours, and that gives me that comfort that look, this person is willing, and if put on the right projects or right work, they will actually stretch themselves to make it happen. Internally, when we do hiring, we have multiple folks who have done either online programs from Upgrad or other sort of providers, because that's a sign that look, in today's day and age, when you did your degree 6 7 years back, and today that skill is no longer relevant, I do need to get the person who can understand the right skill in the new age context. So I think certification, that lifelong learning, is going to be more norm than and sort
Yeah.
of just gyan on various sort of media portals right now.
Yeah.
Shekhar, are you seeing
Absolutely.
a preference for certification courses? Is that something employers look at?
Absolutely. I think, Chandra, I mean, when we started our career and when I joined McKinsey, I know McKinsey would only go to 3 campuses in the country. And that's it. If you're not in A, B, or C, you're not into McKinsey at all, right? And so things have really changed now. I think, and I think, see, one of the good things about tech is it's easy to validate someone's skills. Unlike a sales where you say, okay, maybe I'll just go to the top colleges and play safe. I think platforms like Monster or Naukri, like LinkedIn, whoever is in the business of discovery, we also have a few things to do to help people separate themselves out from the crowd if they've actually gone and done right. So, for example, we've been questioning ourselves why is it that the candidate profile on a platform like Monster hasn't changed for a while? I mean, if people are now being validated, curated, and judged based on skills that they are acquiring, there's so much insights you can draw out from someone's resume. We've actually not done a good job of kind of putting it out to the prospective recruiters. We still go by, okay, where did the person go for undergrad, postgrad, first job, second job? And now we're talking about very advanced stuff. And so, okay, somebody's joined and worked on this particular skill over the course of, let's say, the next 6 years, 8 years. Have they acquired any surround skills? Have they gone for any certification? So we're actually coming up with an index which says what is the learning index of the candidate if we analyze their length of their career. So there are a number of things that you could do to start showing up the good candidates who've gone out there and spent time on learning other skills, courses, etc. And as that becomes more mainstream, let's say if we have millions of candidates who come on to Monster every month, and we are able to showcase this to the recruiters. If you're able to showcase the ones who've been able to kind of up their game on skills, to take other courses, clearly that becomes a factor in terms of hiring. We have to understand that the hiring processes also have changed a lot in the last couple of years. The hiring is now based a lot more on case studies, hackathons, coding challenges. And when that happens, skills become the primary currency. And when skills become the primary currency, some of these things will definitely come up. They become a lot more important than just what college they have gone to. And clearly, I like what Mayank said, because that's something we're trying to incorporate in our own product, saying if someone started a career with skill A and now they're like 5, 6, 7, 8 years into their career, how has their skill graph been? Because whatever you hire someone for, it, what is given, like Hari said, is also that those skills are going to be redundant in like maybe a year or two. So you need to find that demonstrable skill that the person has been able to kind of learn new things as they go through their career. So it's a challenge for us also to showcase who are these candidates who are doing it versus candidates who are not doing it. And hopefully in the next quarter or so, when we launch a new product, some of these should be available to the candidates to separate themselves out from the crowd. But it's very important.
Yeah, Ayush, you wanted to come in on this?
Absolutely, yeah. So this is something which I'm really passionate about, right? Like going to the question which the person asked, that there are like these certificates and to these matter, like how should I really be looking at it, right? So I think I just want to put in a fundamental point that tech education in general needs to be reinvented, right? For one fundamental reason, that tech changes too fast, right? So like at the end of the day, skills will eat degrees for lunch at any point, right? Like if you know how to do things, you will always be valued. And that's because work is now measurable, right? And also remote at a lot of times, right? So I think from that perspective, just going to a building and learning for 4 years and thinking that, okay, this knowledge is going to give me employment for the rest of my life, just does not work in tech, because what you learn will be irrelevant after a few years, right? So I think there is no system which basically helps you continue learning, right? Which you really need to be relevant, right? So all of this stops at 22, which is when it should start, really, right? So I think that I would really look at it from that lens.
Right. Understood. Ritu, are people, getting ready to board your flight? You looked a little anxious there, so if you want to add some thoughts, please do.
No, I think everybody, I mean, I just couldn't agree more with what everyone has said. I think learning has to be part and parcel of our life. Just to add a little bit of humor to that, we usually say that skills can get you a new job or probably keep you in your current one, and degrees is how you find how you get married, how you get yourself a partner in India. So that's an important one. Degrees have a social signaling value that you can't ignore in a country like India. So, well, each has its own place, but skill has, of course, become more relevant today given the dynamism in the atmosphere. So just stay on that path, that's all. I mean, and nothing more to add, to be honest.
Yeah. And also, houses. I had to use my wife's degree. I'm a dropout, so I had to use her degree to get a house in Gurgaon. So social signaling, yes.
Yeah.
No, I can understand marriage, but why did they need your degree for a house? That's what I don't get.
Oh yeah. So if you're basically house hunting, your agents will tell you that, okay, which college you're from, And then he asked me, which company do you run? I said Pesto. Is like, that sounds like a pasta sauce. Landowners want to hear IIT or some, big tech companies, Amazon, etc. So yeah, I think that's another, I was just making a case for degrees there. It's useful.
Right. Mayank, Shekhar, Hari, any of you can come in on this. One trend that we've also noticed is that the startups that are laying off are also hiring for the exact same roles. A lot of people who have laid off are puzzled. They say, what, we just got laid off from this function. And these people go back to LinkedIn and other sites, seeking roles for the exact same function. So what's happening here? So are they kind of, letting go of the highly paid workforce in order to get in, people at lower salaries? I mean, how does one really explain this? Or is it just signaling on a platform? I mean, Mayank, Shekhar, Hari, any thoughts here?
I can only hazard a guess here. Possible what you said seems like an extreme use case of trying to get the salary cost down. But I would like to see one thing that happens when you hire very rapidly, Chandra, is you go wrong in your hiring decisions. Because and it's quite possible that you kind of paid whatever 60%, 80% over someone's current salary and got them in, and you realize that person isn't working out. So it's quite possible, and we're looking at very small numbers. Right? I mean, all of us at some point or other said 12,000 is really like a very small number compared to the overall workforce that they hire. So it's quite possible it's performance dependent. Sometimes it's very local to the teams. You also have to understand that just because it's a startup, it's not small, it's very large. So it's possible that someone said, okay, we're going to expand to 12 cities. So one manager's hired like 100 people, and then they just hired because that particular division has been shut. And it's not like the startups have robust systems, so let me absorb it in some other team. So there could be a bunch of those design issues which are leading to some of this, some of hiring mistakes being corrected. Sometimes it's very specific parts of the team that's getting laid out. But I would be very surprised if any one of the startups have an intentional plan to reduce their salary cost, replacing higher cost resources with lower cost. For a period of time, it's naturally bound to happen, but I really doubt unless someone's heard something very concrete about it.
Yeah.
Mayank, you're clued into all what's happening in these startups. What are you looking at?
I would just say the left side is not talking to the right side. Perhaps more that's a plausible reason that Shekhar said that somebody is hiring, somebody is letting go, and some function is coming down. I think what's happening definitely, if you see the layoffs, and I will just maybe touch upon one more point afterward. These are initiatives that some companies started before time. So a lot of these layoffs, etc., that you're seeing is happening in, okay, I started this initiative, this is not core to me, let me focus on the core and drive that growth. And therefore that shift is happening from that non-core initiative to core initiative. Having said that, Chanda, just maybe one point, because we had spoken a lot about the gloom, doom situation, etc. I just want to mention 2 points, which everybody said earlier also, that while there's a talk of winter, I don't see that there is a winter, so to say. There could be a funding winter, but there's no market winter happening right now, because across all sectors, across all segments that I've seen, that folks are every time saying that, look, the demand is not slowing down. I'm not seeing a slowdown in demand. Yes, perhaps the way I was looking at demand and the cost at which I was going for the demand was different. There's absolute market potential. Even if you're seeing people laying off, they're still seeing growth of 20-30% quarter on quarter or 40% quarter on quarter. So there's that play definitely happening in the ecosystem. It's just the costing structure is sort of changing differently. And I also feel from a founder perspective and from an employee perspective, as the core topic is what should they be focusing on, I think this is the best time to either build your own company and also the best time to build your own career. Because today, amongst all distraction, you can be very much focused on what's the right skill and what's the right career set that you want to build on. And same on the building of companies, you are away from distraction, you're focused on getting your core right. And if your core is right, everything else will follow in place. So I guess this is a good time when a lot of purge and a lot of sort of fluff is getting out of the system, and what we are left with is the right set of fundamentals to build the right business. So from a winter, I think there's a right sort of spring at this point of time in the market. And from a building of business or building of career perspective, this is one of the best times that anyone can go out and build the right sort of businesses and right sort of product. Because 2016, those companies doing phenomenally well. 2008, 2009, those companies doing phenomenally well. And that's what one should take from this step or the environment that we are going through right now.
Right. Ritu, do you think this will also make people a little hesitant before joining startups in future? That they might ask those questions that they did not ask before. What you mentioned, the critical questions on how sustainable will it be? What is this business model? Is it just a cute business model on burning money and distributing money, or is there something more? Do you think it will make people ask these questions? Before joining a startup, that it will not be CTC and incentives alone, or will we be back to square one after a period of pain?
I don't think there will be hesitation, but both sides will definitely be more smarter at the end of it all. I think startups will also be a lot more rational in terms of how they're going about hiring and attracting talents, and the same will happen on the part of a youth who's trying to look at some of these jobs. And again, this is a much needed shakeup because it will actually help us evolve the solution that we all seek, essentially the irrationalities, the knee-jerk approach, the whims, essentially will get taken care of, and hence that's essentially what's going to happen. There might be a pause. People will take a little longer to make their choices, to accept an offer letter, but I don't think that by design every startup, I mean, I have a problem painting every startup in the same brush, because even in edtech, for example, while there are three, let's say, organizations who are going for shutting down, but there are other three who are actually in the same environment doing well, right? So I think that element of qualification will set in, and that's about it.
Yeah, I think Mayank falls in the other three that seem to be doing well, Touchwood.
Well,
No, I
we
don't
have
think.
one
Yes.
too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hari, closing thoughts. Since we are almost close to 7, I'm going to let you have the last word.
Yo, I think this is inevitable. What's happening, as part of these regular ups and downs in the ecosystem. And I also think to your last question, memories are short. When there is a new upturn, the same irrational exuberance will probably revert. There'll be a new set of people in the market at that point of time. So some may have learned their lessons in this cycle, but there'll be a new set of people who will learn their lessons in the next cycle. That's the way of life, I presume. And coming back to one point, I think at any point of time, you have sunrise sectors, sunset sectors. And I
Yeah.
think always you can make a more rewarding career in the sunrise sector. And the other thing is that there are some trends which are always short term and some trends which are long term. For example, the pandemic creating a work from home and learn from home was clearly a short term trend. Some businesses built on that, and they're now cutting short on that. And certain long term trends, I talked of some long term trends, for example, we will run out of fossil fuels. So, renewable energy, all of that, for example, that will always be a growing sector. So, building careers in companies or sectors which have aligned themselves to some long-term trends will always be, more rewarding.
Right. On that note, thank you all very much for joining us on Money Control Masterclass. It's certainly very helpful to understand where we are, the fact that there are still pockets of demand, pockets of hiring, so it's not all doom and gloom, unlike some of the stories that we write. That there is still demand for talent in this market, and there are sectors apart from startups that seem to be hiring very actively. Thank you all very much for joining us on Money Control Masterclass.
Thank you.